The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, military occupation of Southeast Asian countries, Japanese internment, and today's ongoing anti-Asian racist attacks as a result of propaganda spewed by the federal government. With all of these struggles, Asian Americans have so long fought for the right to be included in the United States. Hi all, my name is Chloe Lee, and the working title of my thesis is Mapping Overlapping Struggles, Decolonization and Settler Identity of Asian Americans in I Hotel, 1973 and 1977. I am arguing that through I Hotel, we understand more intimately the intentions of Asian Americans' allies in the fight for decolonization, but specifically during the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969. It is this moment that Yamashita begins 1973 with. Yet, she does it solely from the perspective of Asian American allies, represented by characters Wayne Takabayashi, Ria Ishii, and Stony Ima. I Hotel, as a larger novel, was created by Karen Tae Yamashita 5 years after the building it was named after was revitalized by the Housing and Urban Development Department. Students and tenants joined together to rally around change, though the building was ultimately demolished. Yamashita then uses this event as the foundation for her novel. I Hotel itself, the book, is structured into 10 novellas, each broken apart into a separate room, as if the book itself was a hotel. Each novella focuses on a separate moment of Asian American political formation. As Jinchi Ling writes, Yamashita is detailing the inner workings of the Asian American social movement, its aspirations, achievements, problems, and causes for decline. In this way, Yamashita's novel is an intimate look into what the characters that represent real Asian American activists desire from their politics. Yamashita's choice, then, to focus in on the occupation of Alcatraz, an indigenous-centered and led protest and action, is forcing us as readers to analyze the inner workings of Asian American alliance with indigenous people and how our fights for our issues align, or do not align, with the goals of decolonization in the United States. In Tuck and Yang's article, Decolonization is not a metaphor, they would argue the latter. They would argue instead that the Asian American fight for inclusion is an investment into settler colonialism. In their words, even the ability to be a minority citizen in the settler nation means an option to become a brown settler. But the question Yamashita poses with her choice in Alcatraz being the central theme of 1973 is what is and can be the role of Asian Americans in decolonization when our connection to land and labor in the United States is so complicated. Aiko Day addresses this complex history with her explanation of this triangulated relationship in settler colonialism as demonstrated by this diagram. The diagram creates a third category that currently Asian Americans fall into, the category of alien, as compared to the category of settler or indigenous. This category is distinguished from the settler in their relationship to the land. I do not plan to challenge Tuck and Yang's claim of incommensurability when it comes to settler colonialism. However, this paper is aiming to better understand the role that Asian Americans can play through Yamashita's novel detailing the intimacies of the reason that Asian Americans were drawn to the occupation of Alcatraz. This is the hanging question at the end of the first chapter. The first chapter is the introduction of Alcatraz Island. As stated before, Yamashita's main tool throughout I Hotel is structure. Yamashita has Stony ask this question, ending this chapter with it so that it also lingers in the reader's minds. What are they going to do with your Shoyu? The question is posed then to be answered by the following chapters, one where indigenous people are not the focus despite it being their movement that the story starts with. The answer to that lingering question, as seen by the next 3 chapters, is there is nothing that they, the indigenous characters, can do with Shoyu, because Asian American tools do not have utility in decolonization. This story of 1973 then ends in Tule Lake, the result of that lack of utility. If structure is important, as I argue in I Hotel, then scenes in the beginning and the end are just as important. Starting in Alcatraz and ending in Tule Lake, one of the worst internment camps during World War II of Japanese people, is a deliberate choice of Yamashita's that ties together these struggles without saying they are at all the same. In the scene in the first chapter taking place in Alcatraz, Yamashita combines the question of being an Indian with legality. She quickly lets the readers know in the scenario being an Indian is illegal. She then cuts that off with images of the innocence of Japan in this moment, of raw fish and dipping sauce. The connotations of the two identities are clearly defined, with one being an issue of legality and the other being one of the more innocent racisms of fetishism. In the second scene, Yamashita does this similarly. She describes this character, Uncle Al, noticing the tribe of people, a word used to describe different indigenous nations. She furthermore continues this connotation of indigenous people in having Uncle Al ask, "What reservation is this?" But unlike the first scene, the scene is much more insidious in its interpretation of Japanese Americans, having the soldier bark and immediately ask if Al is a J slur. In this way, Yamashita is combining these two experiences, that of the indigenous people who have and are still fighting for their land back, and those of Japanese people who were seen as alien enough to lock away. Though, again, iHotel does not make the claim that these experiences are the same, and I don't intend to either. In fact, Yamashita's juxtaposition of these two experiencing, structuring each moment at the start and end of the novella, has the effect of demonstrating the longevity of the plight of indigenous people in a settler colonial state. However, the harshness compared to the former innocent racism that is used when addressing the Japanese American population demonstrates the fluidity of the role of Asian Americans and those who are alien. Yamashita is then ending this novella with another question. What happens when we do not align Asian Americans' goals with decolonization? We look at Hawaii as a case study where Asian Americans have grown in power both politically and economically, and now are not just alien labor, but settler themselves. And on the opposite spectrum, the goal of settler colonialism is to displace and erase the indigenous. But what happens then when there are outsiders who do not fit the settler identity perfectly? How will the settler state choose to dispose of them then? Thanks for watching.